Commander Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck of the massive orbital station, watching as another transport ship docked with practiced precision. 3,000 souls looked to her for guidance, protection, and hope. Yet as she watched the families reuniting through the reinforced glass, she felt more alone than ever. The Terran Exodus fleet had been her responsibility for 2 years now. What started as a desperate evacuation from Earth had become humanity's greatest migration story. When the Kylan Empire declared war on all carbon-based life forms, Sarah had been a mere lieutenant colonel in the Earth Defense Force. Now, she commanded the largest collection of human survivors in known space. "Commander," came a voice behind her. She turned to see Captain Martinez approaching with a data pad. His weathered face showed the strain they all carried. "The agricultural reports from Deck 7 are ready for your review." Sarah nodded, taking the pad. Numbers and statistics filled the screen, but her mind was elsewhere. Every decision she made affected thousands of lives. Where they went, what they ate, how they defended themselves, it all rested on her shoulders. The weight of command was crushing, but it wasn't what kept her awake at night. The real problem was simpler and more complex than military strategy. After saving humanity from extinction, after leading the greatest evacuation in human history, after proving herself in battle after battle, she still couldn't find acceptance among her own people. The whispers followed her everywhere. Too young, too aggressive, too different. The old Earth military establishment had never fully accepted her rapid rise through the ranks. They saw her Sino-American heritage, her unconventional tactics, her refusal to follow traditional protocols, and they questioned everything. "Commander?" Martinez was still waiting. "The agricultural output looks good," she said, handing back the pad. "Increase protein rations by 15%. The children need proper nutrition if we're going to survive whatever comes next." Martinez smiled. "Yes, ma'am." "The families will be grateful, would they?" Sarah wondered. Grateful enough to stop the whispered conversations that died when she entered a room. Grateful enough to see her as more than just a temporary necessity. She walked through the corridors of the station, noting how conversations stopped when people saw her approaching. They saluted respectfully, answered her questions professionally, but there was always that distance. That invisible barrier that made her feel like an outsider in her own command. In the central plaza, children played while their parents worked on various projects. The sight should have filled her with pride. These people were alive because of her decisions. They had food, shelter, protection, and hope for the future. Yet watching them laugh and interact, she felt like she was looking through a window at a life she could never have. "Sarah." She turned to see Dr. Yuki Tanaka jogging toward her. The chief medical officer was one of the few people who used her first name. "We need to talk about the radiation exposure reports from the engine crews." As they walked toward the medical bay, Yuki glanced at her friend's face. "You're doing it again." "Doing what?" "That thing where you look like you're carrying the weight of the universe on your shoulders." "Which you are, but you don't have to look so miserable about it." Sarah almost smiled. Yuki was the closest thing she had to a friend in the fleet. The doctor had known her since their academy days and wasn't impressed by rank or reputation. "I'm fine. You're not fine. You're the most successful military commander in human history, and you walk around like you're apologizing for existing." They entered the medical bay, where several crew members were being treated for minor radiation exposure. The engine room workers always pushed themselves too hard, trying to squeeze more efficiency from their aging systems. "The exposure levels are manageable," Yuki explained, pulling up holographic displays. "But we need better rotation schedules. These people are working themselves to death trying to prove their worth to you." "To me?" Sarah was surprised. "Sarah, you inspire fierce loyalty. People would follow you into a black hole if you asked them to, but they also see how hard you push yourself, how little you rest, how much you sacrifice. They're trying to match your dedication." Sarah studied the medical data, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She had never considered that her own struggles might be affecting her crew. She thought she had hidden her isolation well. "There's something else," Yuki continued. "I've been monitoring psychological profiles across the fleet. Morale is high, but there's an underlying tension. People are worried about the future, about where we're going, about what happens when we find a new home." "They should be worried," Sarah replied. "We're carrying the entire future of humanity in these ships. One wrong decision could end everything." "That's exactly what I'm talking about. You can't save everyone, Sarah. You can't be responsible for every single person in this fleet. At some point, you have to trust that you've done enough. Before Sarah could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed everything in red as her communicator crackled to life. Commander Chen to the bridge immediately. We have multiple contacts on long-range sensors. Unknown configuration heading directly for our position. Sarah's stomach dropped. They had been running silent for weeks, hoping to avoid detection while they searched for a suitable planet to establish a colony. Their luck had apparently run out. I have to go, she told Yuki, already moving toward the door. Sarah, the doctor called after her. Remember what I said? You don't have to carry this alone. Racing through the corridors toward the command deck, Sarah's mind was already shifting into combat mode. Personal doubts and feelings of isolation would have to wait. Right now, 3,000 people needed their commander to be at her absolute best. The bridge was chaos when she arrived. Officers called out reports while technicians worked frantically at their stations. The main display showed 5 large contacts approaching from the edge of the system. Report, she ordered, sliding into the command chair. 5 ships, Commander. Configuration unknown, but they're big. Mass readings suggest heavy cruiser class or larger. Sarah studied the tactical display. The ships were still too far away to identify, but their approach vector was deliberate and aggressive. This wasn't a chance encounter. Time to contact range? 4 hours at current speed, ma'am. 4 hours to prepare for what could be humanity's final battle. Sarah looked around at her bridge crew, saw the trust in their eyes, the confidence they had in her leadership. They believed she could save them again. She just wished she believed it herself. Sarah's hands moved across the command console with practiced efficiency, but her mind drifted back to the day that changed everything. 3 years ago, she had been Lieutenant Colonel Chen, a logistics specialist stationed at Luna Base. Nobody expected logistics officers to save the world. The first Kylan attack had come without warning. Earth's outer colonies simply stopped transmitting one by one. When the emergency session of the Earth Defense Council convened, Sarah was the lowest-ranking officer in the room. She sat in the back, taking notes while admirals and generals debated response strategies. We need to establish a defensive perimeter around Earth, Admiral Petrov had declared. Pull back all our forces and make our stand here. The colonies are lost, General Harrison agreed. We can't waste resources trying to save what's already gone. Sarah had listened to the debate for hours, watching as humanity's leaders chose to abandon millions of people without even trying to save them. When Admiral Petrov asked if anyone had alternative suggestions, the room fell silent. Protocol demanded that junior officers speak only when spoken to directly. She stood up anyway. Ma'am, you're out of order, the Admiral's aide had whispered, but Sarah was already moving toward the front of the room. Lieutenant Colonel Chen, Logistics Corps, she announced. I have an alternative plan. Admiral Petrov looked annoyed. Colonel, this is a strategic planning session for senior command staff. With respect, sir, you're planning to let millions of people die without attempting a rescue. I believe there's a better way. The room erupted in angry murmurs, but Sarah pressed on. She activated the holographic display and began outlining her plan. Mass evacuation ships, coordinated extraction points, mobile defense platforms to buy time for civilians to escape. It's impossible, General Harrison declared. We don't have the ships, the time, or the resources. We do if we convert civilian vessels and use automated defense systems, Sarah replied. I've run the numbers. We can evacuate 80% of the colonial population if we start immediately. Those numbers are meaningless without proper analysis, Admiral Petrov said dismissively. You're a logistics officer, not a strategist. Logistics is strategy, sir. Wars are won by the side that can move people and supplies more efficiently. The Kylan Empire conquered half the galaxy because they understood that. We're losing because we're thinking like defenders instead of survivors. The argument that followed was heated and professional. Sarah presented detailed evacuation protocols, resource allocation charts, and timeline projections. The senior officers questioned every assumption, challenged every calculation, and dismissed most of her proposals as unrealistic. But Admiral Petrov was smart enough to recognize tactical brilliance when he saw it. Against the protests of the other commanders, he authorized a limited trial of Sarah's evacuation plan for the Centauri colonies. The trial was a complete success. Sarah coordinated the evacuation of 300,000 people in 72 hours, using converted cargo ships and merchant vessels. When the Kylan fleet arrived to find empty colonies, they had wasted weeks preparing for a battle that never came. That success led to bigger assignments. More evacuations, more impossible missions that Sarah somehow made possible. When Earth itself came under threat, she was the obvious choice to lead the ultimate evacuation. But success came with a price. Every promotion put more distance between her and her fellow officers. Every brilliant strategy made them more suspicious of her methods. Every time she saved lives that others would have written off, she proved that their traditional thinking was inadequate. The bridge crew snapped her back to the present. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission from the lead ship." On screen. The main display flickered, then resolved into an image that made Sarah's blood run cold. The bridge of an alien vessel, dominated by a figure in powered armor. The Kylan Empire had found them. "Human vessel," the alien commander spoke in heavily accented standard. "You will surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in the destruction of your entire fleet." Sarah stood slowly, straightening her uniform. Around her, the bridge crew waited for orders. 3,000 lives hung in the balance, and 5 heavily armed warships blocked their escape route. "This is Commander Sarah Chen of the Terran Exodus Fleet," she replied calmly. "We are refugees seeking safe passage through neutral space. We have committed no hostile acts against the Kylan Empire." The alien's laugh was harsh and mechanical. "There is no neutral space for your species. The Kylan Empire has declared carbon-based life forms to be a threat to galactic stability. You will be eliminated." "I see." Sarah clasped her hands behind her back, adopting the parade rest position that had become her trademark during tense negotiations. "May I ask how you found us? We've been running silent for weeks. Your primitive technology leaves radiation signatures that our sensors detect easily. We have been tracking your pathetic fleet since you left the Sol system." That was useful information. Sarah filed it away for future reference, assuming there was a future. "In that case, you know that we pose no threat to the Empire. We're civilians with minimal defensive capabilities. Civilians who have evaded capture for 3 years. Civilians led by the human responsible for the evacuation of 17 colonies before we could cleanse them properly. Your reputation precedes you, Sarah Chen." The fact that they knew her name wasn't encouraging. It meant this wasn't a chance encounter. The Kylan Empire had been hunting her specifically. "I'm flattered by your attention," she replied, "but I think you overestimate my importance."
"I'm just one officer doing her job. Your job was to die with the rest of your species."
"Instead, you prolonged their suffering and wasted Imperial resources. This ends now." The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Sarah could feel the eyes of her crew on her, waiting for the miracle they expected her to perform. The problem was, she wasn't sure she had one this time. "Status report," she ordered. 5 Kylan heavy cruisers moving into attack formation, the tactical officer reported. "Each ship outguns us significantly. Combined firepower advantage is approximately 15-1. Civilian transports? Docked and ready for emergency departure, but they're too slow to outrun Kylan pursuit ships." Sarah studied the tactical display, running scenarios in her mind. Every option led to the same conclusion: total destruction of the human fleet. Unless navigation, plot a course for the asteroid field at the edge of the system. Best possible speed. "Commander?" The helmsman looked confused. "That field is too dense for large ships to navigate safely." "I know. Transmit the course to all ships and tell them to follow our lead exactly. No deviations, no matter what happens." "Ma'am," Captain Martinez approached her chair. "The civilian transports won't be able to maneuver through that field. We'll lose half the fleet just trying to navigate it. Not if I pilot the lead ship personally." Sarah was already moving toward the navigation station. "Transfer helm control to my console. Commander, you can't seriously be thinking of flying through that asteroid field with 3,000 people depending on you." Sarah paused, looking around at her bridge crew. These people trusted her completely, even when her plans seemed impossible. They had followed her through 3 years of running and hiding, believing that she would somehow find a way to save them all. Maybe it was time to earn that trust. "Captain Martinez, you have tactical command. Prepare all defensive systems and coordinate with the other ships. We're going to thread the needle." As alarms sounded throughout the fleet and ships began moving toward the asteroid field, Sarah took direct control of the massive station. Behind them, the Kylan fleet was closing fast, confident that they had cornered their prey. They were about to learn why Sarah Chen had become the most wanted human in the galaxy. The asteroid field loomed ahead like a wall of death. Millions of rocks, some the size of buildings, others as large as cities, tumbled through space in a chaotic dance that had been going on for millennia. No sane pilot would attempt to fly a fleet of massive ships through such a maze. Sarah's hands moved across the helm controls with surgical precision. The main orbital station, nearly 2 kilometers long, responded to her touch like a fighter craft. Behind her, 18 other ships followed in single file, trusting her to guide them through the impossible. Kylan fleet closing to weapons range. Martinez reported from the tactical station. They're demanding we reverse course. Let them demand, Sarah replied, her eyes fixed on the navigation display. Are all ships maintaining formation? Yes, ma'am. The transport captains are nervous, but they're staying in line. Sarah could understand their nervousness. What she was attempting violated every principle of safe navigation. The asteroid field was a graveyard that had claimed hundreds of ships over the years. But she had something those other pilots didn't have: complete three-dimensional maps of the field's gravitational patterns. 2 years ago, while fleeing the Proxima system, she had spent weeks hiding on the edge of a similar asteroid field. Instead of wasting time, she had used the sensor arrays to map every gravitational eddy and current. She discovered that what looked like random chaos was actually a complex but predictable system. Asteroids moved in patterns following invisible rivers of gravitational force. First waypoint coming up, she announced to the fleet. Sharp turn to starboard in 30 seconds. Do not deviate from my exact path. The lead ship banked hard to the right, diving between 2 massive asteroids that seemed to close like jaws behind them. The following ships executed the turn perfectly, their pilots flying on pure faith in their commander's abilities. Kylan's ships are firing, Tactical reported. Energy beams, but they're not following us into the field. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. The Kylan Empire built their ships for raw power, not maneuverability. Their heavy cruisers were deadly in open space but useless in close quarters navigation. They're trying to box us in, Martinez observed, studying his displays. 2 ships moving around the field to the other side, 3 maintaining position here. Expected, Sarah replied, threading the station between a cluster of smaller rocks. They think we'll try to exit on the far side and run for open space, aren't we? No, we're going deeper. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of engines and the occasional collision warning as chunks of debris bounced off their shields. Sarah was taking them into the heart of the asteroid field, where the gravitational forces were strongest and the navigation most treacherous. Commander, the communications officer called out, we're receiving distress signals from Transport 7. They're reporting structural stress from the gravitational fluctuations. Sarah's jaw tightened. Transport 7 carried 800 civilians, including most of the children. She couldn't lose them, but she also couldn't slow down or change course without dooming the entire fleet. Tell Transport 7 to reduce power to non-essential systems and redistribute mass to the center compartments. It'll help them ride out the gravitational waves. Ma'am, Captain Martinez approached her station. The crew is starting to ask questions. They want to know what the plan is. Sarah didn't look away from the navigation display. The plan is to survive. That's not really an answer, Commander. For a moment, Sarah considered explaining her strategy. Tell them about the gravitational anomaly at the center of the field, the one that would allow them to slingshot out at incredible speed in an unexpected direction. Tell them about her calculations showing that the Kylan ships couldn't possibly intercept them if they executed the maneuver correctly. But she didn't. Because the truth was that she wasn't entirely sure it would work. The mathematics were sound, but she had never actually tested the theory with ships this large, and if she was wrong, they would all die together in a brilliant flash of light. Signal from the Kylan fleet, communications reported. They're offering terms for surrender. Put it through. The alien commander's image appeared on the screen again, his armored form radiating confidence. Human commander, you cannot hide in that field forever. Your ships are not designed for such navigation. Eventually, you will make a mistake and your entire fleet will be destroyed. You're probably right, Sarah admitted. But we'll take our chances with the asteroids rather than with your prison camps. There are no prison camps for your species. The Kylan Empire has decreed total extinction for carbon-based life forms. Surrender now, and we will make your deaths quick and painless. Sarah looked around the bridge at her crew. These people had families throughout the fleet. Children, spouses, parents, all depending on her to find a way out of this trap. Counteroffer, she said calmly. Leave this system immediately, and we'll forget this encounter ever happened. The alien commander's mechanical laugh echoed through the bridge. You are in no position to make demands, human. Your primitive vessels will tear themselves apart long before you reach the far side of that field. You're assuming we're trying to reach the far side. That got his attention. The alien leaned forward, his glowing eyes focused intently on the screen. What do you mean? Figure it out yourself. Sarah cut the transmission and turned back to her navigation console. They were approaching the most dangerous part of the journey. Ahead lay the gravitational anomaly she had discovered in her research, a point where 3 large asteroids created overlapping gravity wells that formed a natural slingshot. Hit it at the right angle and speed, and they would be catapulted out of the field faster than any pursuing ship could follow. Miss by even a few degrees, and the gravitational forces would tear their ships apart. All ships, prepare for maximum acceleration in 60 seconds, she announced to the fleet. Emergency protocols are now in effect. Secure all loose objects and personnel. Commander, the science officer called out from his station. I'm reading massive gravitational distortions ahead. The stress on our hull will be enormous, I know. Reroute all available power to structural integrity fields. Ma'am, that will leave us with minimal shields and weapons. We won't need weapons if this works, and if it doesn't work, shields won't save us anyway. Sarah's fingers danced across the controls as she lined up their approach vector. The mathematics had to be perfect. Too fast and they would overshoot, crashing into the massive asteroid on the far side. Too slow and they would fall into the gravity well, crushed by forces beyond imagination. 30 seconds to gravitational insertion point, she announced. Throughout the fleet, families huddled together in their quarters, trusting that their commander knew what she was doing. In the engine rooms, technicians watched their displays with growing alarm as the ship's structure began to groan under the mounting gravitational stress. 15 seconds. Sarah could feel the bridge crew watching her, waiting for some sign of doubt or uncertainty. They wanted reassurance that she had everything under control, that this was just another impossible situation she would somehow navigate successfully. But she didn't have that reassurance to give. This was pure calculation and hope, backed by 3 years of running from an enemy that wanted humanity extinct. 5 seconds. All ships maximum acceleration on my mark. The moment of truth arrived with terrifying speed. Sarah triggered the acceleration sequence and suddenly they were falling into the gravity well, pulled by forces that threatened to tear the massive station apart. Alarms screamed throughout the ship as hull plates buckled and corridors filled with the sound of straining metal. Behind them, the rest of the fleet followed, each ship fighting to maintain formation as the gravitational anomaly grabbed them and slung them forward like stones from a massive slingshot. For 30 seconds, they rode the edge of destruction, balanced between escape and annihilation. Then suddenly, they were through, shooting out of the asteroid field at incredible speed. Heading for open space. Status report, Sarah called out, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. All ships accounted for, Martinez reported with obvious relief. Transport 7 reports minor hull damage, but they're still flying. Kylan fleet? Still trying to navigate around the asteroid field. They're at least 6 hours behind us at current speeds. Sarah finally allowed herself to relax, settling back in the command chair. They had done it. Against impossible odds, they had escaped another trap and bought themselves time to find a new hiding place. But as she looked around at her celebrating crew, she couldn't shake the feeling that this victory was temporary. The Kylan Empire would keep hunting them, keep finding them until eventually there would be nowhere left to run. They needed more than clever tactics and desperate escapes. They needed a real solution. They needed a home. 3 days after the asteroid field escape, Sarah walked through the civilian quarters and heard the whispers more clearly than ever. They thought she couldn't hear them, but sound carried differently in the recycled air of a space station. She's reckless, someone muttered as she passed a group of families gathered around their children. We almost lost Transport 7 because of her stunts. Better than being dead in a kill-in-prison camp, another voice replied, but with less conviction than Sarah would have liked. How do we know? Maybe surrender would have been better than this constant running. Sarah kept walking, her expression neutral, but each word hit like a physical blow. These people had no idea what Kylan prison camps were like. She had seen the recordings from the outer colonies before the final evacuation. The Empire didn't take prisoners. They conducted experiments. In the central conference room, she found the monthly civilian council meeting already in progress. As fleet commander, she was supposed to attend these sessions to address concerns and coordinate with the elected representatives from each ship. She usually sent Captain Martinez in her place. Today, she decided to attend personally. Commander Chen, Dr. Elizabeth Warren, the council chairwoman, looked surprised when Sarah entered. "We weren't expecting you." "I thought it was time I heard your concerns directly," Sarah replied, taking a seat at the back of the room. The council members exchanged nervous glances. They had been discussing her leadership, and her sudden appearance clearly made them uncomfortable. Sarah could see the agenda items listed on the wall display: resource allocation, educational programs, and command structure review. The last item caught her attention. "Please, continue your discussion," she said calmly. "Don't let my presence change anything." Dr. Warren cleared her throat. "We were just discussing the recent navigation incident and whether our current command structure is optimal for long-term survival." "Navigation incident?" Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Is that what we're calling successful escapes from superior enemy forces now?" Council member David Park, a former corporate executive, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Commander, with respect, the maneuver through the asteroid field put thousands of civilian lives at risk. Some of us question whether such extreme tactics are necessary. The alternative was surrender and execution," Sarah replied evenly. "I thought that was fairly clear from the Killen commander's transmission." "You could have negotiated," suggested Maria Santos, who represented the families with children. "Perhaps found a diplomatic solution?" Sarah stared at her for a long moment. "Negotiate with a species that considers all carbon-based life forms a galactic threat? What exactly did you think I should offer them?" "I don't know," Maria admitted. "But there has to be a better way than constantly running and risking our lives. If you have suggestions, I'm listening." The room fell silent. Sarah could see the frustration in their faces, the desire for easy answers to an impossible situation. These people wanted normal lives, predictable routines, the safety and security they had known on Earth. Instead, they had an uncertain future and a commander who seemed to thrive on dangerous gambles. Dr. Warren spoke carefully. "Commander, we appreciate everything you've done for us. Your tactical brilliance has saved us countless times, but some council members feel that your approach might not be sustainable for long-term survival." "My approach?" "The high-risk maneuvers. The split-second decisions that affect thousands of people. The refusal to consider alternatives to constant flight." Sarah felt a familiar knot forming in her stomach. Here it came. The questioning of her methods, the suggestion that someone else might do better. The polite way of saying she wasn't what they needed. "What alternatives?" she asked. "We've been over this. The Kylan Empire controls 70% of known space. The remaining governments are either allies of the Empire or too weak to offer us protection. We can't fight them. We can't hide from them indefinitely, and we certainly can't negotiate with them." "What about the Jara Collective?" suggested Dr. Warren. "They've remained neutral in the Empire's expansion. The Jara consider humans to be intellectually inferior. They'd turn us over to the Kylan Empire for the right price. The Altarian Republic? Destroyed 6 months ago. We picked up the distress signals before their capital world went silent." One by one, Sarah dismantled their suggestions, explaining why each potential ally was either unavailable, unreliable, or already dead. With each explanation, the council members looked more frustrated and helpless. Finally, David Park slammed his hand on the table. "Then what's the point? If there's nowhere to go and no one to help us, why are we even running? Why don't we just find some isolated planet and wait for the end?" "Because that's not who we are," Sarah replied quietly. "Humans don't give up. We find ways to survive that no one else thinks possible. We adapt, we overcome, and we never stop fighting." Easy words from someone who doesn't have children to worry about. Maria Santos snapped. "You can afford to take risks with your own life, but you're gambling with our families." The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Sarah felt something cold settle in her chest. This was the heart of it, the real reason they questioned her leadership. She was alone. No family, no children, no personal attachments that made her understand their fears. "You're right," she said finally. "I don't have children. I don't have anyone depending on me for emotional support or comfort. All I have is the responsibility for keeping 3,000 people alive in a galaxy that wants them dead. She stood up slowly, looking around the room at faces that showed everything from embarrassment to defiance. You want to know why I take risks? Because the safe choices are illusions. Every day we delay, the Empire gets stronger. Every system we avoid is one less option for the future. Playing it safe means dying slowly instead of quickly. Commander, Dr. Warren tried to interrupt, but Sarah continued. You elected this council to represent civilian concerns, and I respect that. But military decisions remain my responsibility. If you don't trust my judgment, you're free to elect a new fleet commander at any time. The suggestion created a stir of uncomfortable murmurs. Everyone knew that no one else had Sarah's tactical experience or knowledge of Imperial capabilities. Replacing her would be suicide, and they all knew it. We don't want a new commander, Dr. Warren said carefully. We just want to feel like our concerns are being heard. Your concerns are heard, Sarah replied. But they don't change the tactical reality we face. The Kylan Empire wants humanity extinct. Every decision I make is designed to prevent that outcome. If you have better ideas, I'm still listening. Silence filled the room again. Sarah could see the conflict in their faces. Gratitude for her protection warring with resentment at their powerlessness. They wanted someone to blame for their situation, and she was the most visible target. After a long moment, she turned toward the door. If there's nothing else, I have patrol schedules to review. Commander, Maria Santos called out as Sarah reached the exit. We do appreciate what you've done for us. It's just hard sometimes. Sarah paused, her hand on the door control. I know, but hard is better than dead. Walking back to her quarters, Sarah reflected on the conversation. The council members weren't wrong to question her methods. She did take enormous risks, made decisions that could doom them all, and refused to consider options that might provide temporary safety at the cost of long-term survival. But what they didn't understand was that she took those risks precisely because she cared about their survival more than her own comfort. Every dangerous maneuver, every desperate gamble, every moment of terror they endured was calculated to give humanity a future. The problem was that saving people and earning their acceptance were apparently two different things. She could lead them through impossible dangers, but she couldn't make them trust her completely. She could protect their lives, but she couldn't become part of their community. In her private quarters, Sarah pulled up the long-range sensor reports. Somewhere out there in the darkness, the Kylan Empire was still hunting them. And somewhere out there, hopefully, was a solution that would give humanity a real chance at survival. She just had to find it before the Empire found them, before her own people decided they needed a different kind of leader, before the loneliness of command became too much to bear. The distress signal reached them at 0347 hours ship time. Sarah was already awake, studying star charts in her quarters, when the emergency communication pierced the quiet of night watch. Commander to the bridge immediately. Priority 1 signal from unknown human vessel. Sarah was dressed and running through the corridors within 2 minutes. Human vessels were extinct as far as she knew. The Terran Exodus fleet was supposed to be the last survivors of their species. Report, she ordered as she burst onto the bridge. Signal originated from the Kepler system, approximately 6 light-years from our current position, the communications officer explained. It's definitely human, but the encryption codes don't match any ship in our database. Play the message. The main screen flickered to life, showing a man in a tattered Earth Defense Force uniform. Behind him, sparks flew from damaged consoles while red emergency lighting bathed everything in an ominous glow. This is Captain James Richardson of the Earth Defense Ship Defiance. We are the last survivors of Battle Group 7, requesting immediate assistance. We have approximately 400 civilians aboard, and our life support systems are failing. Kylan pursuit ships are 3 hours behind us. If anyone receives this transmission, please respond. We can't run much longer. The message ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Battle Group 7 had been reported destroyed 2 years ago during the defense of the Tau Ceti colonies. How is this possible? Captain Martinez whispered. Sarah was already moving to the navigation console. Plot an intercept course for the Kepler system. Maximum sustainable speed, Commander. Martinez caught her arm. This could be a trap. The Empire has captured human ships before. They could be using this to lure us into an ambush. Sarah paused, studying the tactical display. Martinez was right to be cautious. The timing was suspicious, and the Kylan Empire was certainly capable of elaborate deceptions. But there was something in Captain Richardson's eyes, a desperation that seemed genuine. "Analysis of the transmission?" she asked the communications officer. "Signal degradation patterns are consistent with long-range broadcasts from damaged equipment. No obvious signs of artificial enhancement or alien technology. Scan for other ships in the area. Long-range. Sensors show no contacts within 10 light years of the Kepler system except for the distress signal source." Sarah made her decision. "Set course for Kepler. Alert all ships to prepare for potential combat operations." "Commander," Dr. Warren's voice came from the bridge communications panel. "The Civilian Council is requesting an emergency session to discuss this development. Tell them we'll discuss it after we've rescued the survivors." "Ma'am, with respect, this affects the entire fleet. The Council has a right to be consulted." Sarah felt the familiar frustration rising. "Captain Martinez, you have the bridge. Continue on course to Kepler." The emergency council session was already in full swing when Sarah arrived. Representatives from all 18 ships filled the conference room, their faces showing a mixture of excitement and fear. The possibility of finding other human survivors was intoxicating, but the risk of walking into a trap was terrifying. "Commander," Dr. Warren began without preamble, "the Council has serious concerns about this rescue mission." "Of course you do," Sarah replied, taking her seat. "But 400 people are going to die if we don't help them." 400 people who might not exist," David Park countered. "This could be an Imperial trap designed to destroy our entire fleet." "It could be," Sarah agreed. "But if it's real, those people have been running and hiding for 2 years just like us. We don't abandon other humans." Maria Santos leaned forward. "Commander, I understand the desire to help, but we have 3,000 lives to consider. Our first responsibility is to the people already under our protection. Our first responsibility is to humanity," Sarah shot back. "That includes humans we haven't met yet." The argument that followed was intense and emotional. Council members cited their responsibility to their constituents, the need for caution, the dangers of exposing the fleet to unnecessary risks. Sarah listened to each argument and dismantled them one by one with cold logic and tactical analysis. "The decision has been made," she finally declared. "We're going to Kepler." "The Council votes to override your decision," Dr. Warren announced. 16 votes to 5. "The fleet will not proceed to the Kepler system." Sarah stared at her for a long moment. In 3 years of leadership, the Council had never attempted to override a military decision. The fact that they were doing so now over a rescue mission revealed how much trust she had lost. "The Council has no authority over military operations," she said quietly. "The Council has authority over fleet movements that affect civilian safety," Dr. Warren replied. "This falls under our jurisdiction." "No, it doesn't." The room erupted in angry voices as council members argued about jurisdiction and authority. Sarah sat in silence, watching the people she had saved tear themselves apart over a decision that should have been automatic. Finally, she stood up. "This discussion is over. The fleet is going to Kepler." "Commander," David Park's voice was sharp with anger. "You can't simply ignore the democratic will of the people you're supposed to serve." "I serve humanity," Sarah replied. "All of humanity. Not just the comfortable majority who want to hide in the dark while others die." She walked out of the conference room, leaving behind a storm of protests and threats. In the corridor, Captain Martinez was waiting for her. "The Council is talking about removing you from command," he said quietly. "They can try. How long to reach Kepler?" 18 hours at current speed. "Any change in the distress signal?" "It's getting weaker. Their power systems are failing." Sarah nodded grimly. If this was a trap, they would know soon enough. If it wasn't, 400 people would die while the Council debated jurisdiction. 18 hours later, they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system. Long-range sensors immediately detected a damaged human vessel drifting near the 4th planet, venting atmosphere and debris. "It's real," Martinez breathed. "Scans confirm human life signs aboard. Approximately 400 souls, just like the message said. And the Kylan pursuit ships? 3 vessels, approximately 2 hours behind them. Heavy cruiser class." Sarah felt a cold smile cross her face. 3 ships instead of 5. Better odds than they'd faced in the asteroid field, but still dangerous. "Signal the damaged ship. Tell them we're here to help." Captain Richardson's face appeared on the screen, older and more weathered than in his distress message. Behind him, the bridge of his ship showed extensive damage, but his crew was still fighting to keep their systems operational. "Commander Chen," he said with obvious relief, "I can't believe you're actually here. We've been running on emergency power for 6 days. What's your status, Captain?" "Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. Life support failing. Engines offline. We've got wounded who need immediate medical attention." "Understood. Begin evacuation procedures immediately. We'll have transport ships alongside in 30 minutes. "Commander." Richardson's expression grew grave. "The Kylan ships tracking us aren't just regular pursuit vessels. They're carrying experimental weapons, some kind of energy weapon that can disrupt electronic systems. That's how they caught us." Sarah felt ice in her veins. Electronic disruption weapons could cripple their entire fleet. If the Empire had developed that technology, nowhere would be safe. How effective are these weapons? They disabled our entire ship with one shot. Took hours to get basic systems back online, and we're still not at full capacity. Sarah looked around her bridge, seeing the fear in her crew's faces. This rescue mission had just become something much more dangerous. They weren't just saving survivors, they were facing a new threat that could doom them all. "Captain Richardson, you and your people are coming home," she announced. "All ships prepare for combat operations. The Empire wants to test their new toys on human targets." As evacuation ships launched toward the damaged vessel and the fleet prepared for battle, Sarah realized that this moment would define her leadership forever. Success would prove that taking risks to save human lives was the right choice. Failure would confirm every doubt the Council had raised about her judgment. 3,000 lives hung in the balance, and the Kylan Empire was bringing experimental weapons to the fight. It was time to show them why humanity had survived this long. The evacuation of the Defiance took 28 minutes. Sarah watched the transport ships ferry survivors across the void, while her tactical display showed the approaching Kylan vessels growing larger by the minute. 400 exhausted, wounded people now depended on her fleet for survival. Captain Richardson was among the last to leave his dying ship, transferring to Sarah's command station with what remained of his senior staff. His first sight of the orbital station's bridge left him momentarily speechless. "Commander Chen," he said finally, "I owe you more than I can ever repay." "Save it for after we survive the next hour," Sarah replied, studying the tactical display. "Tell me about these electronic disruption weapons." Richardson moved to the secondary tactical station, calling up what remained of his ship's sensor logs. "They call it an ion cascade projector. It creates a chain reaction in electronic systems, cascading through ship networks and disabling everything connected to the main power grid." "Countermeasures?" "We tried everything. Faraday cage protocol, system isolation, electromagnetic shielding. Nothing worked. The effect propagates through quantum field interactions, not just electrical connections." Sarah felt a chill of understanding. Quantum field weapons were theoretical technology, decades beyond current human capabilities. If the Kylan Empire had made them practical, every ship in human space was vulnerable. How long does the disruption last? Depends on ship size and system complexity. Our vessel was down for 4 hours. Smaller ships recover faster, but anything larger than a frigate is effectively dead for at least 2 hours. "Commander," Martinez called from his station. "Keelan ships dropping out of hyperspace. Range 12 million kilometers and closing." Sarah's mind raced through tactical options. Traditional combat was impossible if the enemy could disable her ships with a single shot. Running wasn't viable with slow civilian transports. She needed something completely different. "All ships implement Protocol 7 immediately." The bridge crew exchanged uncertain glances. Protocol 7 was Sarah's most extreme contingency plan, never tested in actual combat. It required shutting down all major ship systems voluntarily, essentially making themselves dead in space, ma'am. The communications officer looked confused. "Protocol 7 will leave us completely defenseless." "Execute the order," Sarah commanded. "All ships power down to emergency levels only. Minimal life support, no engines, no weapons, no active sensors." "Commander," Richardson stared at her in shock, "you're making yourself sitting ducks. The Kylan ships will destroy you easily." "Will they?" Sarah pulled up a holographic display showing the tactical situation. "Captain, you said the ion cascade effect targets active electronic systems. What happens when there are no active systems to target?" Understanding dawned in Richardson's eyes. The weapon would have nothing to lock onto. Exactly. Dead ships don't register as threats. Sarah turned to her crew. Signal all vessels. We're playing dead. Throughout the fleet, ships went dark one by one. Emergency lighting replaced normal illumination, and the hum of active systems faded to silence. On the tactical display, the 19 human vessels appeared as lifeless hulks drifting in space. Kylan ships are scanning us, the passive sensor operator reported quietly. They're confused by our power signatures. Sarah watched the enemy vessels on her display, 3 sleek predators approaching what appeared to be a graveyard of disabled ships. The lead Kylan cruiser was broadcasting on multiple frequencies, demanding response from the human fleet. They're moving to boarding range, Richardson observed. If they send over inspection teams, they won't, Sarah replied with certainty. The Kylan don't board vessels they consider contaminated with human presence. They'll try to confirm we're dead, then destroy the hulks. Minutes passed in tense silence. The enemy ships circled the human fleet like vultures, their sensors probing for signs of life. Sarah could feel the tension radiating from her crew as they waited in the artificial darkness of a ship pretending to be dead. Kylan, ships are powering up their ion cascade weapons, the sensor operator whispered. This was the critical moment. If Sarah was wrong about Kylan procedures, if they decided to use their new weapons on apparently dead ships, the entire human fleet would be genuinely disabled and helpless. The enemy weapons fired, brilliant streams of exotic energy lancing across space toward the human vessels. The beams struck ship after ship, searching for electronic systems to disrupt, but they found nothing. No active networks to cascade through, no powered systems to overload. The weapons were useless against truly dead ships. Kylan fleet is moving closer, the sensor operator reported. They're trying to figure out why their weapons didn't work. Sarah waited until the enemy ships were at optimal range, close enough for maximum effectiveness but far enough to avoid immediate retaliation. Then she gave the order that would change everything. All ships full power. Weapons free. Target the lead cruiser. The human fleet came alive like a sleeping dragon awakening. Engines roared to life, weapons systems charged, and suddenly 19 ships that had appeared dead were very much alive and very angry. The Kylan ships had no time to react. They had expected to find disabled hulks, not a coordinated ambush. The lead cruiser took the full concentrated fire of the human fleet, its shields failing under the unexpected assault. Target the weapon systems on the remaining ships, Sarah ordered. I want those ion cascade projectors destroyed. The battle that followed was brief and decisive. Caught completely off guard, the Kylan ship struggled to respond to an attack that should have been impossible. Their revolutionary weapons were useless at close range, and their conventional armaments were no match for the concentrated firepower of 19 human vessels. Within 15 minutes, all 3 enemy ships were disabled or destroyed. Scan for survivors, Sarah ordered, and check those weapon systems. I want to know everything about that technology. As the crew rushed to analyze the enemy vessels and secure the battlefield, Sarah felt a strange mixture of triumph and emptiness. They had won a significant victory, destroyed weapons that could have doomed humanity, and saved 400 additional lives. But she could see the reactions of her own crew, the mixture of awe and fear in their expressions. Once again, she had pulled off an impossible victory through tactics that bordered on insanity. Once again, she had proven that she could save them all, and once again, she felt more isolated than ever. Captain Richardson approached her station, his face showing deep respect mixed with something that might have been fear. Commander, that was brilliant. I've never seen anything like it. It was necessary, Sarah replied simply. The way you anticipated their tactics, the precision of the timing, the understanding of their technology. How did you know it would work? Sarah looked around the bridge at faces that showed the same question. Her crew wanted to understand how she did it, how she consistently found solutions that no one else could see. They wanted to believe it was genius or luck or divine intervention. They didn't want to hear the truth that she had considered every possible scenario because she couldn't afford to fail, that she understood enemy psychology because she studied it obsessively, that she took impossible risks because the alternative was watching humanity die slowly. Experience, she said finally. Richardson nodded, as if that explained everything, but Sarah could see he didn't really understand. None of them did. They saw her victories but not the weight of constant responsibility. The knowledge that every decision could doom thousands of people. The isolation that came from being the person everyone looked to for miracles. Commander. Martinez approached with a datapad. The Civilian Council is requesting an immediate meeting. They want to discuss the battle and its implications. Sarah almost smiled. Now that the crisis was over, now that her tactics had proven successful, the council wanted to talk. They would praise her victory, thank her for saving the survivors, and probably try to take credit for authorizing the mission. But they would still keep their distance. They would still see her as something apart from the community she protected. They would still whisper about her methods and question her decisions when they thought she couldn't hear. "Tell them I'll meet with them in an hour," she said. "I need to review the tactical data first." As the bridge crew returned to their normal duties and the fleet began moving away from the battlefield, Sarah stood at the observation window looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Kylan Empire was learning that their new weapons had failed, that humanity had found a way to turn their own technology against them. It was a significant victory, but Sarah knew it wasn't the end. There would be more battles, more desperate escapes, more impossible decisions. The Empire wouldn't give up, and neither would she. The question was whether she could keep winning battles while slowly losing the thing she wanted most, a place where she belonged. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the main plaza of New Terra Station, watching children play in artificial sunlight while their parents worked on the final preparations for humanity's first permanent settlement in over 3 years. The planet below them was green and blue, with vast oceans and continents that promised a real home. They had found it by accident, a world hidden in a nebula that blocked long-range sensors. The Kylan Empire would never think to look for them here, and the natural phenomenon provided perfect camouflage for their ships. For the first time since leaving Earth, humanity had a chance to build something lasting, but Sarah felt more disconnected than ever. "Commander," Dr. Yuki Tanaka approached with a concerned expression. "The final settlement teams are ready for deployment, but there's something you need to see first." Sarah followed her friend to a small conference room where an unexpected gathering waited. Captain Richardson sat at the table alongside representatives from each ship in the fleet, but these weren't the usual council members. These were people she rarely interacted with: engineers, teachers, farmers, artists, families with children. "Commander Chen," Richardson stood as she entered. "Thank you for coming. We wanted to speak with you before the final transition to planetary settlement." Sarah remained standing, her posture unconsciously shifting to the formal stance that had become her default around civilians. "What can I do for you?" A woman Sarah recognized as a hydroponics engineer spoke first. "Commander, we've been talking among ourselves about the settlement plans, and we have a request." "I'm listening." "We want you to be our planetary governor." Sarah blinked in surprise. "I'm sorry." Richardson leaned forward. "Commander, over the past 6 months, we've all seen what you accomplished. Not just the military victories, but everything else. The resource allocation that kept us fed, the diplomatic protocols that maintained order, the educational programs that prepared our children for life on a new world." "That's my job," Sarah replied automatically. "No," said Maria Santos, the woman who had once accused her of not understanding family concerns. "Your job was to keep us alive in space. What you did was build a functioning society while we ran from our enemies." Sarah looked around the room at faces that showed none of the usual wariness or discomfort. Instead, she saw something she had never expected to see. Respect that wasn't tinged with fear. Gratitude that wasn't reluctant, acceptance that wasn't conditional. "I don't understand," she said quietly. Dr. Elizabeth Warren, the former council chairwoman, smiled. "Commander, for 3 years we've been asking ourselves the same question. How does she do it? How does one person consistently find solutions that no one else can see?" "We thought it was genius," added David Park, "or luck, or some kind of supernatural insight. But it wasn't any of those things," Maria Santos continued. "It was something much simpler and much more impressive." Sarah waited, still not understanding where this was leading. Richardson stood up and walked to a wall display, activating a holographic presentation. "Commander, do you know what your daily schedule looked like for the past 6 months?" The display showed a complex timeline broken down by hours and minutes. Sarah's routine was laid out in stark detail: 4 hours of sleep, 2 hours reviewing tactical reports, 3 hours walking through civilian sections listening to concerns, 1 hour analyzing resource allocation, 2 hours studying enemy communications, 1 hour coordinating with ship captains, and on and on. You spent more time in civilian areas than in the command center, Warren observed. More time listening to complaints than issuing orders. More time studying our needs than planning military operations. I was doing my job, Sarah protested. Your job was fleet command, Richardson replied, but you made it your responsibility to understand every aspect of civilian life. You memorized the names of everyone's children. You tracked food preferences to optimize morale. You learned about artistic projects and educational needs and interpersonal conflicts. The display changed, showing a network diagram of connections throughout the fleet. At the center was a node labeled S-Chen, with lines extending to every other person in the community. This is a social network analysis, Park explained. It shows how information and influence flow through our society. Do you see the pattern? Sarah studied the diagram, her analytical mind automatically processing the data. The network showed her connected to every major group and individual in the fleet, serving as a central hub that linked separate communities together. You were never an outsider, Warren said softly. You were the center that held everything together. We thought you were distant because you seemed different from us, Maria Santos added. But you weren't distant at all. You were present everywhere all the time, watching over everything and everyone. Sarah felt something shifting inside her chest, a knot of isolation that had been there so long she had forgotten it existed. But the council meetings, the complaints about my methods, were frustration at our own helplessness, Richardson admitted. We wanted to contribute, to have some control over our situation. But every time we tried to question your decisions, you proved us wrong. Every time we suggested alternatives, reality demonstrated that your way was better. We felt useless, Park said bluntly, and instead of recognizing that you were carrying an impossible burden, we resented you for making it look easy. Dr. Tanaka spoke for the first time since bringing Sarah to the meeting. Sarah, do you remember what I told you about people trying to match your dedication? Sarah nodded. They weren't trying to impress you. They were trying to be worthy of the sacrifices you were making for them. You worked yourself to exhaustion to keep everyone safe and comfortable. How could they do any less? The room fell silent as Sarah processed everything they had told her. For 3 years, she had felt like an outsider, someone who protected the community but wasn't truly part of it. She had seen the respectful distance as rejection, the hesitant questions as doubt, the awe in people's faces as fear, but she had been wrong. The settlement governor position, she said finally. Why are you offering it to me? Because, Richardson replied, we finally understand what we have in you. Not just a military commander, but someone who sees all of us as individuals worth protecting, someone who makes impossible decisions so we don't have to, someone who carries the weight of leadership so perfectly that we forgot how heavy it was. And because, Maria Santos added with a smile, our children ask about you constantly. When will Commander Chen visit our deck? When will she tell us more stories about Earth? When can we show her our latest school projects? Children? Sarah was confused. You didn't know? Warren laughed. You're the most popular adult in the fleet among the children. They see you as this fascinating person who can do anything, who always has time to listen to their questions, who treats them like they matter. Sarah thought about her walks through the civilian sections, the constant interruptions from curious children wanting to know about space travel or alien species or what Earth was like. She had always answered their questions because it seemed polite, not realizing the impact those conversations had made. Commander, Richardson said seriously, we're not offering you the governorship because we think you're the only one who can do the job. We're offering it because we want you to know that you belong here, with us, not as someone standing apart, but as the person who brought us all together. Sarah looked around the room one more time, seeing faces that no longer seemed distant or critical. These people weren't asking her to change or adapt or become someone different. They were asking her to be exactly who she had always been, someone who cared about humanity's survival more than her own comfort. I accept, she said quietly. The response was immediate and overwhelming. People stood up, shaking her hand, patting her shoulder, smiling with genuine warmth. For the first time in her adult life, Sarah felt like she was exactly where she belonged. 3 months later, As the first permanent buildings rose on the surface of New Terra, Sarah stood on the observation deck of the orbital station and watched transports ferry supplies and settlers to their new home. Behind her, the hum of conversation and laughter filled the air as families prepared for the next phase of their journey. Dr. Tanaka joined her at the window, following her gaze to the planet below. "Any regrets about giving up fleet command?" she asked. Sarah smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes for the first time in years. "Someone else can worry about military tactics for a while. I have a planet to build." "And how does Governor Chen feel about that responsibility?" Sarah watched a group of children playing in the plaza behind them, their voices carrying promises of a future that no longer seemed uncertain. She had led thousands through the darkness of space, but now she would help them build something even more impossible: a home. Governor Chen feels like she's finally found her place in the world. For the first time since leaving Earth, Sarah Chen felt like she belonged.